Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Claire and this is Books and Seasons. Everybody loves talking about their favorite books and I am no exception. I feel like sharing some of my favorite books with you all today will give you an idea of the type of books that I love and the type of books that you can expect to see on this channel in the future. It is gorgeous outside right now and it's actually going to rain, maybe thunderstorm later. So I wanted to take the time to get outside, even if I don't have the ability to film outside right now. I thought that you can get a little taste of it. I'm sorry if the angle is changing. I'm still pretty new to all of this, and right now I decided to scrunchie my phone onto my rearview mirror. But anyway, let's get into the video. I couldn't decide if I should talk about this book first or last, because it is my favorite book of all time, but I think I'm just gonna start off the video with it. So here you go. My favorite book of all time is Circe by Madeline Miller. So, Circe is about the goddess Circe, who is the daughter of Apollo. Despite being born into great power and wealth, she is rejected by her family because she is considered ugly, her voice is considered grating, and she is an outcast among the gods. This book takes place from the day that Circe is born up until thousands of years later when she is well into her adulthood. So it is essentially a coming-of-age story, but because it is a goddess's coming-of-age story, it takes thousands of years to come full circle. Now, before reading this book, I was already really excited to learn more about Circe because of what I knew about her. When I was a freshman in high school, we read the Odyssey, and Circe has a pretty important role in that story. She is the goddess who lives on the island that Odysseus and his crew land on, and that is the island where she turns his men into pigs. I was excited because it already seemed to me like Circe is a pretty feminist figure in mythology. However, the view of her in the Odyssey is still pretty flawed. In the Odyssey, Circe primarily serves as a sex object to Odysseus. She may be a dangerous sex object, but she's still a sex object. Of course, Madeline Miller built Circe's story off of the web of Greek mythology that Circe appears in. And it actually really amazes me how Madeline Miller is able to make her character seem so lifelike based on the kind of impassive stories that we get from mythology. I know that some people didn't actually care for Circe very much, and they felt like, based on the Odyssey, she was going to be a take-no-prisoners feminist figure. I'm tempted to do a more in-depth review on this, but in summary, I disagree with that take. I think that Circe is so much more than the woman that turns men into pigs, and I think that's actually what makes her an extremely feminist character. I'm watching over everything I filmed, and I realized that I forgot to put a trigger warning in for this book. It does include a rape scene, so if that is something that you are sensitive to, I think that is something you should definitely be aware of going in. This book is exciting, and I was at the edge of my seat for quite a bit of it. But what I really appreciate about this book is its overarching feeling of calm. Circe is not a perfect character. She's headstrong, she's vindictive sometimes, but there is something about her voice that is so peaceful, and I think that's part of what makes this book so beautiful. It's my favorite book of all time. I don't think it could ever be topped, and of course, I recommend it to everybody because I think it's perfect. Now, the rest of the books in this list are not going to be in any particular order. By the way, this is not an ad, but if you're wondering what kind of scrunchie I have that can hold up my phone like this, and it's not twisted at all, it's just around my phone and around my rearview mirror, it is Caitlin Bristow, who is from The Bachelorette. She has a scrunchie line called Do Edit, and they are kind of expensive, but I am so impressed with how strong they are. They can hold up my hair in 2 twists, which nobody else can do. So if you're wondering, I would recommend those. The second book or series on my list is To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. This series follows the aftermath of Lara Jean's love letters from when she was younger being sent out to every boy she ever wrote them to. I'm guessing most of you know about this series because of the Netflix adaptation, which is excellent. This series has so many things that I love. I love the fake dating. I love the family dynamics. And most of all, I loved the coziness of this book. Jenny Han is a master at capturing these small details that make life homey and warm and cozy. For example, I'm not sure if it's the first book or later on in the series, but one of these books has kind of a side storyline of Lara Jean trying to make the perfect chocolate chip cookie. So she's just constantly making different batches and trying to find the perfect recipe. That is the kind of thing I mean when I say that Jenny Han is a master at small, cozy details. And I really think that that is also what helped me connect to Lara Jean as a character. I read this when I was away from home at college, but still feeling very homesick and very nostalgic for what my life had been like before I moved. I felt like I was weird and childish for feeling that way because it seemed like I was the only one who still was. And reading about Lara Jean and her tight-knit family and just her personality really gave me some comfort when I needed it. I also feel like YA and just books in general need more characters like Lara Jean who are unapologetically feminine. I think that too long YA has valued protagonists who reject femininity. It's not a weakness. This series is 5 stars all around. I grieved these characters after finishing the last book, and I really hope to reread them soon just to get myself back into that world. Like everything else I talk about in this video, I highly recommend it. The third book on this list of my favorite books is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I am not a fantasy reader, and yet I think that Leigh Bardugo is probably my favorite author. Leigh Bardugo is the queen of well-developed characters, of dark atmosphere, of witty banter, and of pushing back on oppressive systems. If you want to see revenge taken on structures of patriarchy and male violence, this may be the book for you. Ninth House has all the pillars of Leigh Bardugo's work, paired with the wonderful atmosphere of dark academia. Yes, I want to see Lara Jean baking cookies. Yes, I also want to see some secret societies fucking shit up while some fall leaves sprinkle in the background. Maybe I should actually talk about the book. Thing is, it's kind of hard to describe. So, Alex Stern is our protagonist in this book. She has had quite a troubled life. She ran away from home when she was a teenager and ended up getting involved with a group of drug dealers. She goes on to live with this group, and after some time, just Alex's luck, the home is targeted by a mass murderer, and Alex Stern is the lone survivor. While in the hospital recovering from her injuries, a man from Yale comes and speaks to her and asks her if she would like to come to Yale. It turns out many people from Yale and their secret societies have been watching her for years and know her secret, which is that she can see ghosts. She is invited to join their 9th house Leith, which is the house that keeps all the other 8 houses in check, keeps them from hurting other people or breaking the rules. This book has incredible characters, which it's Leigh Bardugo, what do you expect? I loved Alex. I also loved Darlington, as I think most people do. Also be aware that this book has rape, sexual assault, and intense violence. The world building does take some time, and I think a lot of people had a hard time getting into it because of that. However, once I got past that, I truly felt like I was reading the beginning of one of those iconic YA series when I was a kid, where not only could I not put it down, but I could not wait for what was to come. Ninth House has everything I wanted from it. It has dark academia. It has very clever defiance of patriarchy. It has just enough magic to keep me interested, but not too much. And characters that I could root for. I would definitely recommend reading this in the fall. On a similar note, I want to mention a couple other books that I don't own physically, but that I would consider among my favorite books ever. And those are 2 more of the dark academia theme. I am talking about The Secret History by Donna Tartt and If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. The Secret History is what many would call a modern classic. It follows our main character, Richard, as he moves from California to go to a small liberal arts school in Vermont. When he gets there, he is kind of awestruck by this small group of students in the classics major who seem very elite and tight-knit. Richard, pretentious boy, he wants to join this elite group and he finds a way. However, the story does not end well. Halfway through the year, one of the people in the group is murdered. You know this from the very beginning of the book, so you're reading not to figure out what happened, but how it happened. If We Were Villains is very similar. It also focuses on a group of academically focused students, except instead of classics, these students are obsessed with Shakespearean theater. Somebody in the group in If We Were Villains is also murdered, and the story starts 10 years later as the member of the group who was accused of this murder, Oliver, is released from jail. Despite 10 years going by, the detective who worked on this case is still interested in finding out what really happened. Even though Oliver was convicted of the murder, the detective approaches him and asks him for the real story because he doesn't feel like he has found it yet. And so the book alternates between us observing Oliver talking to the detective and the actual flashbacks to the story. Even though If We Were Villains is very much inspired by The Secret History, it's clear that it contemplates good and evil in a very different way. And so despite them kind of having a very similar storyline, I felt like they were very different. Again, I would recommend both of those for the fall. They're perfect. The fourth book on this list is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. So let's start off by talking a little bit about John Green, because I know that there are a lot of people who don't like him. In most of his books, he does return to very similar tropes, and I understand why people have a problem with that. However, I feel that most people who criticize John Green have probably not read this book. When people talk about John Green's catalog, they're mostly talking about all the books that he wrote up through The Fault in Our Stars, which was published in 2012. Turtles All the Way Down, however, was published in 2017. I truly feel that John Green took a lot of the criticism against his writing to heart, and he really changed things in this book. I realized that I forgot to mention something that is actually pretty important to me about this book, and that is how impressed I was with how John Green wrote his girl main character. Usually I can tell when a man is writing a girl or a woman character, and it usually reads a little off to me. However, this felt so realistic, and I honestly think that I would have assumed that a woman wrote Aza's character if I didn't know that it was John Green. So that's one thing that I also think he really turned around for the better. Turtles All the Way Down follows Aza, a girl who happens to live in the same town as a billionaire who goes missing. There is a substantial reward for any information about him, and her best friend decide that they would like to try to get that reward. Aza's plans to get this reward, however, are derailed by her struggles with her mental health. She struggles with anxiety and OCD, and these struggles get worse and worse as she tries to ignore them throughout the book. This book is a bait and switch in the best way. Instead of being about getting a reward for finding a missing billionaire, it ends up being about the very real struggles to function with mental illness, particularly with anxiety and OCD. Now, this is an Own Voices story. John Green himself also struggles with OCD and anxiety. There were still elements of this book that were like any other YA contemporary, because just because Aza struggles with her mental health does not mean that she's not a typical teenager. And I also really appreciated that. Turtles All the Way Down is both gripping and painful, both heartwarming at times and also quite difficult to read at others. I want to bring light to trigger warnings in this book, which are self-harm, spiraling anxious thoughts, and also a car accident. We are placed into Aza's head in a way that feels very tangible. And so while that's great, it also can be quite anxiety-inducing as she spirals into anxiety. That said, as somebody who does have anxiety, this book was actually cathartic for me to read. I actually really need to reread it soon. It's a wonderful book, and I know that when I read it, I felt like I wanted not only everyone I knew to read it, but that I would want my future kids to read it. Goes without saying that it's 5 stars and highly recommended. The last book that I would like to talk about, one of my favorite books of all time, is Sadie by Courtney Summers. Our protagonist, Sadie, has also had quite a hard life. She lives in a trailer park with her grandmother and formerly her little sister Maddie. However, her little sister was murdered and her body was recently found. Sadie is frustrated both at the lack of answers for her sister's death and that she seems to be the only one who cares to find these answers. She is convinced that her sister was murdered by their estranged father, and so she runs away to go find him and exact revenge. Now, the rest of the world does not know where Sadie has gone, and so the story ends up getting the attention of a podcaster named Wes McCrae, who is intrigued by this story of one sister murdered and another sister missing. As we follow Sadie in her search for her father, we also are listening to this podcast, which is covering the story, talking to people closer to Sadie and trying to find information. This book talks about missing girls in a very realistic and therefore very heartbreaking way. I feel that is probably all you need to know and possibly all you should know about this book going in. However, it really impacted me, and it is now one of my favorite books ever. So that is it for some of my favorite books of all time. I hope I did them justice. I hope that if there's any of them that you haven't read yet, that you will pick them up at my recommendation. Thank you so much for watching Books and Seasons, and I will see you again soon.